All right. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christoph Stolbert. I'm with SAP. I'm responsible for SAP's Big Data Channel go-to-market these days. And one of the products that I'm responsible for is SAP Data Hub. So that's the product that I'm talking about. But before I can get into that detail, what the product really does and also how it interfaces with SUSE's portfolio specifically, and what you can do with the thing, I have to really paint a picture first of what the product or the problem statement is. But the issue is that we're seeing with our customers, that you probably also see with the same customers, to really appreciate the functionality and the power of this thing. So I'll go just a little bit of introduction and challenges that we see in the market, give you a product overview, of course, go into the architecture, some use cases I've been asked to cover, and I'm very fond of the custom content because of the openness of the architecture. You'll see and where you can get some more information. Yeah, the colors are not really the prettiest. I don't know why it comes across this way. It looks okay on my laptop.
Sorry, I noticed, but I did.
Yeah, no. It's really hard to read, actually, some of the stuff. If you want to come around, look at my laptop. It's much better this way. Yeah, but so the problem and the situation that we see with customers is complex landscapes. That's really the reality. And not just within SAP systems where you have several different applications and several different systems running in various stages, from development to production, QA, production support, DR, God knows what, and different locations. But you have complex scenarios where you have non-SAP systems to deal with, big data systems, Hadoop, any kind of object stores. And increasingly, the business depends on utilizing all the insight of various different data sources, regardless of where they are and what they are, for new business models and for the benefit of new capabilities. IT, however, is always hindered with these silos, and the answer cannot be just to replicate data to yet another EDW or yet another data mart for the purpose of a specific project or request of a business unit. The problem here is orchestrating that while still adhering to governance and making data sharing really scalable. What we see also, what I see a lot is a divide between two different worlds within our customers. It's on one side where innovation is driven, and the other side where business applications are managed. I often call it also the hoodies versus suits kind of syndrome. They also, not just from a process perspective and business focus perspective, but also from a tools perspective, they are very divided. Totally different skill sets. One is agile or tries to be agile. The other one adheres very much to risk management and product management, promote to production capabilities, and these two shall never meet, right? It's really a divide also in organizations. So what we see, trying to categorize all these challenges in simple, understandable buckets is these three areas that we've identified. It's the missing link between enterprise and big data. It's the lack of security and governance. And by far, in my opinion, the most complex is the requirement for so many different tools, associated skill sets, having to manage interoperability with so many tools. Every data scientist selects their own tools, different versions, and different data sets associated. This is really something hard for the enterprise to get their arms around. And that probably also one of the reasons why so many big data projects or Hadoop projects fail or don't really get to a productive level. One of the other requirements associated with these tools and different skill sets are the different, the colors really look not very nice. I'll show you later on my laptop, just to prove you. I don't know what this thing is doing. Christy is not playing along. So you have different rules or different roles and skill sets for different purposes in the organization. You have the IT and system administration folks that have to manage the environment, provide the tools, provide the environment. You have the consumption folks more on the business side, business analysts, data designers, data architects, data scientists. And everybody has different requirements, but everybody talks about the same kind of data, which needs to exist in different disciplines throughout the enterprise. That's lots of different data sources, landscape management, pipelines, governance, and consumption. It's always the same story, but the complexity with these different tools, that's really the challenge here, right? So, of course, Data Hub is the answer. That's my pitch here. And really, what the cool thing about Data Hub is it includes so many different source systems, also target systems. From data lakes to applications, of course, SAP applications, but also non-SAP databases and data sources. In fact, you'll see that later, Data Hub supports out of the box a lot more non-SAP systems than SAP systems. And the capabilities and the functions within Data Hub revolve around ingestion, recovery, discovery, metadata management, pipelining, just the modification and the enrichment of data, and also the consumption of it. So, this is how Data Hub looks like. The color is actually more greenish than bluish. We have a yellow issue going on here. So when you first launch Data Hub, you get to the launch pad, which provides these different tiles. And those are the functions of Data Hub that you can branch into. One of which is, for example, data landscape management, where you define connected systems. The core of the functionality, in my opinion, is really data pipelining. That's really where the power of Data Hub comes to shine. And data governance, also an area that's of interest, and increasingly also in the market necessary on the topic of metadata management or metadata availability throughout an organization. So we go into each of them. Data landscape management, something interesting, because that's where you define the connection to various systems that Data Hub supports, be it a HANA system or an S4 system, BW system. Current version 2.4, next version 2.5 also supports non-HANA SAP systems to be natively connected to. Right now also supports things like data services, for example, replication server. So a huge host of SAP components, but also native database connections to DB2, Oracle, and others, SQL Server, message systems, and so on and so forth. I'll go through some of that in more detail. We utilize the securities and authentication and authorization on the target systems. And whoever creates the connections also has the ability to define to what level you can interact with that source data from that remote system. Monitoring, of course, is also something very important. Data pipelining. So if you think about, as I said earlier, another data warehouse, EDW, cannot be the answer to yet create another copy of something larger in a centralized place. Also, the name Data Hub is sometimes misleading. It's not a hub of data, it's a hub of governance and a hub of metadata information. It's a hub of facilitating data sharing and complex data integration scenarios. It's a hub of that. It's not a hub of data. So we had long debates about the name, as we always do at SAP, but Data Hub, that's what we settled on. And data pipelining is really something cool, because this is where you now connect the capabilities of the data in the connected systems, where you define data operational processes. So you can do a lot of different things. You see that on the next screen in more detail, what some of these things are. You can transform, enrich, change, cleanse, clarify, combine data in that area as well. That's really where you can not only do joins of different data on different systems, for example, from a HANA system plus a table that you may load from a Hive or from a Hadoop system into a table that has similar structures or combined mean something larger from a table perspective. You can do that, but you can also include machine learning foundation, for example, from SAP or things like TensorFlow. And it's also a distributed processing capability. I'll talk about that a little more when I talk about the architecture. This is how, this is really hard to see on these colors. Oh boy. I'll show you after the presentation. You come around and I'll show you on my laptop. But so this is the main screen of the data pipelining tool, right? And you have here on this side, you have all these capabilities that Data Hub comes out of the box with, and those are connectors, those are processors, those are a number of different things that are units of capability or units of work that you basically drag over onto the canvas, and from there you can create a pipeline of successive actions against or towards a set of data. This can be one set of data from one system or multiple systems. It can be very simple pipelines, can be very complex pipelines. You can create multiple pipelines to interact with one another in a graph. It is very, very flexible. On the other side over here, then you have the ability to define parameters and additional components. And also on the bottom, or if you change the view from diagram to JSON, you can just write your code as well as part of that. So it's developer-friendly, but it's also an admin-friendly tool that is tailored really for all these various different personas that have to do with data integration and these complex scenarios. So in the pipeline area, right, just again, you can see that very well. But out of the box, Data Hub comes with the current version 2.5 with around 250, 260 different operators. And those are things like connectors to message systems like Kafka, producer or consumer, MQTT, Google Pub Sub, different connectors to storage systems like an HDFS, all the object stores on the public cloud storage providers. Also RESTful clients to APIs. So you have the ability to integrate data from an S3 bucket with data that comes directly from an application or write to an application. Native connections, of course, to a bunch of SAP systems or to databases, right? We have processing capabilities for Python, Go, JavaScript, and other languages out of the box, also integrated and included. But you can also include your own. And I'll get to that towards the end of the content here. We are operators for predictive capabilities, for R, for Spark. You can execute jobs also within other Hadoop systems, for example, with some additional components that we provide also with Data Hub. Machine learning capabilities, like I already mentioned, where you can image recognition, combine that with system data out of your material master, for example. We have some customers who do things in the manufacturing arena, for example. Some live, real-time analysis of the production plant or the production cycle of specific components, where they measure the structure of components, do image recognition, compare that to a baseline, and even give you information where, for example, a faulty component comes from, or where the vendor is who provided the subsets for the component. So a bunch of different functionality that Data Hub comes out of the box with, and with the latest version 2.4, which is 2.4.1, patch level 1 is the current version. I think 2.5 is scheduled right around Sapphire. That's our big conference just in 4 weeks from now. We have, as you see here, DB2, SQL, MySQL, and BigQuery connections also on the table or on a SQL level. And this functionality will only continue to expand, right? I think we provide per year about 3 different versions, 2 or 3 different versions, depending on the cycle of the year. One version is an enhancement from a functional perspective that provides additional functionality. The next is a hardening version. So we basically change that up between each version.
Just a quick question.
Please.
You say it comes out of the box. So is it something that typical end user will have to hire an integrator to set up, and then once it's set up, it's running, or can the end users easily modify what they're trying to connect to if need be?
Both is possible, right? So we have some boutique SIs, for example, have already Data Hub Quick Start packages made available. In fact, some of them are available in the SAP App Center. That's our digital store, right? So you have the ability to tap into system integrators who have already Data Hub capabilities. I think it's very useful when it comes to data integration scenarios for certain industries or specific use cases where the skill set in-house is not available. But you also have the ability to build your own, completely freeform, whatever you may require. And you also can include conditions and code sets, libraries and tags within Data Hub that SAP doesn't deliver. I'll get to that in a little while.
A lot of training involved with that, like command line type stuff, or is it just very easily?
It depends, unfortunately. It depends on the complexity of your scenario. A lot of things are more intuitive, how also the UI is designed, right? You drag and drop. You have connection points, outputs, inputs. An output from one operator is the input to the next operator. And so it depends on how deep you want to get into. So it's a platform for somebody. For example, you would have maybe developers or data integrators, data architects build pipelines for specific requirements that the business may have. Business analysts or data analysts on the other side, or data scientists, they may be consumers of these pipelines that somebody else has created, right? Because they depend on the availability of a specific data set that may come from a variety of different systems that they don't know where they come from, and they don't have to know with a tool like that.
Okay, great.
Sure. And yes, we have more and more training, of course. Yeah, I'll show you some additional resources where you can get next steps. The third area, so this is data pipelining, the second area. The third area that Data Hub has a strong set of functionality in is data governance. I just had a conversation, actually 2 conversations on the floor today with a few customers where the problem of metadata availability specifically, or metadata repositories in an organization is really a big problem. Because on one side, the business wants to utilize their data, but on the other side, they don't know what kind of data they have or how that data looks like. So if you talk to CDOs these days, the nice thing or the complex thing is they often have not just one data repository or metadata repository, but many. And so we have customers who intend to utilize Data Hub for the simple purpose of connecting all their systems in the Data Hub context. You have the ability to browse and profile data of these connected systems. Data Hub stores, the only data that Data Hub really stores in a persistent manner is the metadata about the connected systems that you give it in the context. And so we have the ability to store metadata, things like how the data looks like, what kind of fields are available, how the data types look like, what are common denominators, common values, where are null values, how does the cardinality look like. And you can give it custom tags like sales or purchasing or whatever makes sense for the business in the business unit. So now a data scientist or a business analyst doesn't have to ask IT anymore once you have such a repository available. They can just log into the system, browse for a particular kind of data set that means something to them. If they're tagged correctly, they get a set of data, metadata information that they can basically consume for their purposes without knowing where the data comes from and which system that data actually is supplied to. So it gives really a central point of understanding the data availability for an enterprise throughout boundaries, and also limitless, meaning no matter if the data is local or remote in a cloud or multiple clouds, Data Hub has the ability to connect really to anywhere. So right, in summary, just high level from a functional perspective, you can include a multitude of different data types We can read and write from a variety of different systems and to a variety of different systems. It's a single view of the data that is made available within a Data Hub context. It doesn't centralize data, right? Even though it says hub, it's not a mass storage movement into a single repository. That's not what we're trying to create. And it's a distributed native processing capabilities, which brings us next also to the architecture. Data Hub is different than any application SAP has ever brought to market. Why is that? The architecture alone describes that. Data Hub is only available in Docker images and runs in its own Kubernetes environment, on its own Kubernetes cluster. 100%, all components. Including components like the internal SAP HANA system that's used for the management capabilities of Data Hub itself, persistence, for example, query organization. So there's already, we have heard that in the keynotes, you've heard that also maybe on the floor, shop floor, talking about containerization of applications that proliferates in the market. Also true for SAP. This is a 100% containerized application. It includes a small component of SAP HANA, also within Data Hub. It's not usable for anything else. You can't even connect to it. But Data Hub uses SAP HANA under the covers, also containerized. As I said, it's running completely in its own Kubernetes environment. And all the functions that I touched on, right? The capabilities across these tiles in the Launchpad that are available, the distributed runtime, where there's also an in-memory engine available that allows you to bring data persistent into memory, into Vora engines, for example, and create relational tables out of data from S3, for example, that can create joins with actual tables in other databases. The pipelining workflows, I touched on that a little bit, right? Metadata application, touched on that as well, and the capability. But Data Hub in itself, by itself, is really, you can't do much with it. You need connected into an ecosystem of data, right? So the point is here that you have the ability optionally to connect any kind of data stores that you may require. That can be object stores out of public cloud vendors. It can be also Hadoop on-premise systems. We provide even additional components like the Data Hub adapter and Vora Spark extensions. If you want to execute Spark jobs on your Hadoop cluster, they only have to be installed on the Hadoop edge node, not on all the nodes. That would be very cumbersome with a 1,000-node cluster. But yeah, so these capabilities are already available. And so you have the possibility to not just ingest data out of these different data storages, but also write towards them, which then could be downstream consumed by something else, by a pipeline that could also be defined within Data Hub. And then there, of course, are a number of connected systems. And yes, it would be silly if SAP provides a tool that doesn't connect to SAP systems. That's table stakes, right? But in addition to these SAP systems, it's not just, for example, in the case of BW, right? It's not just that you connect to a BW system and have access to the tables of BW. That would be limiting. What is more powerful is when you have the ability to utilize BW objects, like process chains, as they exist within BW, as they have been defined by a customer within their enterprise. So such an object could be utilized within Data Hub as well. So you don't have to build cubes again. You can utilize cubes from BW within Data Hub. Or S4HANA, right? You don't want to just utilize the access to a table, although you can, right? You want to actually access the logic from a business process perspective. Then data services, right? I mean, that's a tool by itself that supports a number of different universes from various different areas, SAP and non-SAP. Web server, HANA natively, not application specific. That's HANA as a general purpose database, of which we see also more and more use cases. Other databases, so like via GDBC, ODBC, or also OData, right? Is also a protocol we support. cloud applications, that's also something that we see more and more integrated, because internally within SAP we have the same challenge. We have not just one SAP, we have SuccessFactors, we have Ariba, we have CX, we have C4C, and so on and so forth. Those are more or less independent businesses with their own systems. If we try to create a functionality that requires data from different APIs and different systems across the world, guess what we're using internally? Data Hub. So it's not just something that we sell to our customers, and partners can also use to build complex and custom scenarios in. We use it for our own purposes as well. And then open connectivity, third party and open source. Something, especially I think here at SUSECON, is very important to point out. Because of the open architecture of Data Hub, you have the ability to really include other components within a Docker and Kubernetes context that may not be supplied or delivered with Data Hub. And that's really the openness that we're talking about. Now, where the rubber really meets the road is in regards to the on-premise challenge, meaning no or very few customers really like to get into Kubernetes management, deployment, and from an operational perspective themselves. They're looking at partners like SUSE to provide Kubernetes capabilities, right? I still meet customers who have never heard of Kubernetes or just don't know how to put something like that together, or they may just not want to, right? They're outsourced, they just manage SLAs, so they're looking to include that into their stack as well. So private cloud infrastructure, that's where SUSE comes into play, right? And the SUSE CaaS platform is one of the very few platforms for Data Hub that are certified to run Data Hub in productive scenarios, right? So we have a certification process that's managed by product management of Data Hub, and SUSE CaaS platform does things like workload scheduling, right? The service discovery, load balancing, which is important, application scaling, important also in the context of Data Hub, because within Kubernetes you have the ability to define how many pods are automatically created based on load requirements, right? And so this is where we have worked with SUSE from the very beginning of Data Hub to develop something that is neatly integrated, and we continue to work with one another. Some of you in the audience know that very well. And here's just a reference of the CaaS platform stack. And so if you want to learn more, I would say you talk to the gentleman here in the room in the back, or somebody downstairs, or you go to this URL. The QR code brings you to the same URL. I'm not a CaaS specialist, right? That's where I hand it over to our friends at SUSE. What is Data Hub used for? We see, so Data Hub is a little bit over a year old, October 25th, 2017, I think. 19, yeah, that's when we GA'd Data Hub. And so the patterns of usage that we see with our customers and also partners, I can categorize in 4 different areas. One of which is IoT, and that's a pretty obvious one, because with an IoT scenario you have the challenge of orchestrating data flows across multiple different places and very different data types and data sources. So you have data lakes, you have hopefully a HANA system or another SAP system in play. In fact, Data Hub also works for completely non-SAP systems, but with all the rich integration to SAP systems, that's not the low-hanging fruit. So IoT is an obvious use case area. Data science, machine learning, supplying the data capabilities for data scientists, for example, facilitating the capability to ingest data from various different places, correlate data with one another, prepare the data for the usage of a data scientist, even apply machine learning algorithms against the data and produce the output into a data lake, for example, or any connected system. Depends on the preference of the customer. Intelligent data warehouses, it's also a topic that I touched on a little bit, right? We see more and more EDWs really changing their profile. It's not just a centralized place anymore to hold all your data and try to make a rhyme or reason of it. These days are over because data is really, I call it E for everywhere. It's completely distributed. But views of that data and different slices of that data are very interesting for business purposes or business evaluations downstream for business analysts. And they have requirements that go really across multitude of different locations and data types. Not just one EDW. And I used to work for a large enterprise for a long time, and we had 15 different EDWs because there were 5 different business units with independent CIOs, and nobody likes to play with one another. Data Hub can solve the problem by providing the view of data across multiple systems without disrespecting the boundaries an enterprise has within themselves, for example. Different SLAs. The business doesn't care. They need the data and access for purposes of insight or even creating new business models. So governance and data cataloging, I already talked about that example, just to connecting all systems within Data Hub, making the metadata available, and let anybody utilize that within the context of Data Hub who has the requirement to access certain kind of data. And I also always like to spell out also Analytics Cloud, just really an amazing piece of business intelligence software that's really just available in the cloud. It's very attractively priced. I was blown away, $30 per person per month, and you can do really amazing things with it just to visualize data. So here's an example. That's actually a customer architecture. Can't name the customer. I can only say if you the product that the customer creates gives you wings. So they have the situation that they also have data from various different places, not just not just stationary, but also streaming. They use S3 buckets and also an on-premise Hadoop to collect a lot of that data for the purpose of, in this case, it's business intelligence. Some of the data is then cleansed, filtered, and all this is orchestrated in these pipelines within Data Hub. Some of the data is loaded into Vora engines in memory, in the same Kubernetes cluster. And we create tables. All that is done automatically and orchestrated to Data Hub, correlated with data into SAP HANA, and also processed or visualized in SAP Analytics Cloud. Orchestrating something like this, making that happen outside of Data Hub is possible, but it's very complicated. And you don't have a single pane from an operational perspective to see where in the process something could break. So scripts can make that possible as well. Managing that would be more complicated. Another customer's example is, also I can't say the customer name, but they make home appliances, right? Small, large home appliances, and they have sensors in these home appliances. They make the information of these sensors, smart coffee machines, smart fridge, and things like that, available to their customers via a connected app on a smartphone. The real purpose for collecting all that data from these endpoints is to get better insight about the usage pattern of products. For example, the R&D effort and cost associated with a specific function in a washing machine may be very high compared to how often it's used actually in the market or in a specific market. So you have the ability to tune your R&D efforts and your roadmaps much better if you know how your products are used out in the field. The use case is exactly that. Data also here is utilized via, it comes from different places, but for example, part of it is a Kafka stream that comes also into S3. There are some CSV files and application API provide data. They first are getting collected in an S3 bucket, also in a public cloud, because the collection points, the endpoints, and this is really an IoT scenario, right? They are all over the place, utilizing a public cloud object store as a first stage to collect that is more and more a common practice. Also here, some of the data is loaded into Vora tables, and then we're using, also in this case, BW, additional data out of the system to bring it into context For example, to supply information about what kind of device it is. The data comes across with identifiers that are meaningless to the product engineers. In the SAP system, these identifiers are actually correlated to what that system actually is, or what that device in the home actually is. Also utilized and visualized via SAP Analytics Cloud. And I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, right? It's about 16 terabyte. By now, it's probably more than that. Somewhere between 6 and 7 million devices, well over 15 terabyte of data that comes daily into that environment and provides product management more insight. So how are we doing on time? 10 more minutes, right? Custom content. This is something that I find very interesting, actually, and this is a new area that we are going to message also at Sapphire in a couple of weeks. So you get a little bit of a preview here. And I think this is also very apropos for SUSECON, where the topic of open is really very important. So I talked about Data Hub as SAP codes it, the functionality set and the features of the versions that we make available. Right? This is Data Hub as is the Data Hub delivered functionality built on the framework of Docker, Kubernetes, and the pipeline modeler, for example, that we provide. That's a set of functionality that we also document, right? Good old help.sap.com, developer guides, admin guides, and so on and so forth. But because of the architecture, it allows you also to create custom content. So we have the ability, customers will do that anyway, but we're also working on the ability for partners to create custom content and sell that separately as an individual piece of IP that can plug into an existing Data Hub installation. So in short order, I don't know if you're familiar with the API Hub, that's api.sap.com. That's where we're going to offer a new section called Data Hub. And that's where functionality will be made available. This can come from internal from SAP, from the use cases that we are actually creating internally, right, for our own challenges around the same subjects, or that partners have built and that partners offer at a fee to simply plug into Data Hub. So these can be, on a very simple basis, could be custom operators. So an operator that exists within Data Hub, that is modified, stored in a different way, tagged in a different way, has a specific code included that maybe does some Python or some R logic against a set of data, or third-party Docker images, right? You have the ability to define your own language. You know, for example, Scala is not included, at least not at the moment. That you may need for your data processing purposes. So you can define libraries and tags that you may need in the context of everything else that Data Hub already provides and extend it to the degree that you need it. And then you can also go as far as creating complete pipeline sets. Define pipelines with, for example, Python or Go code already included that can be plugged into a Data Hub, for which you would have to provide, let's say, description, what kind of connected systems are required, which are the data types that are needed to make this possible, and define parameters from an environment perspective to plug such a complete pipeline into. But these can be templates that provide functionality for certain use cases, like a customer 360, for example, for telco, or could be a preventive maintenance for machine learning capability in manufacturing. So, and then later in the year, or maybe towards the end of 2019 into 2020, we're also making embedded applications available. You'll hear at Sapphire more about applications that reside on and live within the Data Hub context that we provide. There's something new coming. And towards the end of the year, we offer that also for partners to build embedded applications that, when you remember the launchpad of Data Hub, how that looks like, that would be simply another tile of an embedded application. So how could that look like, right? The architecture of Data Hub, these 4 points. Custom operators, they would be available within the pipeline modeler. pipeline templates, same thing, that's where they would live. Custom or third-party Docker images. As I said, different libraries, tags, and so on. And embedded system applications, they would be listed within the architecture as a separate functionality that utilizes components of Data Hub, maybe not all of it, but some that is required to supply the capabilities for that application. As an example, right, just to walk you through a base operator, how that can look like. You define, for example, a base operator, let's say, and I have a screenshot also in here, like a JavaScript operator. You can include some custom code here. You define the custom operator. You include some scripts. You include some code. You can save it as such, and you can tag it as such. And you basically can combine that IP in a separate repository. So this is really hard to see. This is useless for you from far away, right? You can't see anything. So let me walk you through, and I'm happy to share that on my laptop with you. So we have here, in this case, we use a base operator, a JavaScript operator. Okay. And we call it category custom. So we want to change something that this base operator provides out of the box with. So we create simply a very simple code that does a good old hello world. We save it as such, and then we create the simplest form of a graph is a program that does something, and it writes it to standard out to a terminal. So in this case, we simply test hello world. That's how we save that graph. And now we have the ability to save this piece of IP that we created and export that out of Data Hub. In the file management section, you have the ability to mark the components that you have custom developed and export them as a CSV or as a zip file, transport them wherever, and at the same place. If I go back here, you have the import capability as well. So you can import such a zip file that brings you in a complete set of functionality. Now, this is really interesting because this really allows me, for example, to standardize specific components that I may want to standardize within my enterprise. Or if I'm a nifty developer, I create something that is very unique within Data Hub. I save that as a zip file, and I market that and offer that to customers through SAP channels or also directly. And have that validated through SAP. There's a process associated, of course. So yeah, the extensibility options, right, in summary, I mentioned pipeline templates, operators, Docker files, content delivery. It always has to follow the structure. And we will have in short order documentation available how to do that. And it will be available on the content marketplace. A bunch of different links that are included in the presentation. I think the presentations are made available online. What to do next, what I always recommend, watch some of the videos on YouTube that give you ideas of what Data Hub really can do. Some of them are really cool, and just play with it, right? The trial edition is good for 30 days. For example, the trial edition here, it runs on the Cloud Appliance Library. You can define if you want to run it on AWS or GCP. It does the installation for you by itself automatically. That's the easiest way to get started. Or if you want to play with it on your own machine or your own laptop, you can get the developer edition and you can install it yourself. With that, I want to thank you for your attention. QR code, my business card, SUSE's CaaS website, or if you want to know more about Data Hub, you can take pictures or you can just talk to me. In either case, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.